He came to cast her out. His wolves were asleep at her feet. The order had been in my saddlebag for 11 days. I had not read it again after the first time. I did not need to. The elders of Kelrath Border Hold had written it in the careful, muffled language men use when they want a king to do their work for them. The woman Rena Aldcroft, of no pack standing, occupies the lower stone cottage adjacent to the garrison yard, and has done so since the death of her mate Edric Aldcroft, 3 years past. Her presence is a source of disorder. The garrison men speak of her too freely. It would be fitting for the king's hand to resolve this matter during his inspection of Kelrath Hold. Fitting, that was the word they chose. I knew what it meant. It meant they had tried to move her themselves and found some obstacle they did not name. It meant they wanted my authority behind it so that whatever came of it would not land on their own heads. It meant the woman had done nothing they could actually charge her with, or they would have charged her. I rode into Kelrath at mid-morning on a day when the moorland fog had not yet lifted from the lower ground. The hold was 4 towers and a garrison block, stone the color of old iron, set on a ridge above the Varn crossing. I had been here twice before, once when I was young and my father held the border, once 3 years ago when I came to see to the garrison after a raid from the Crescent side. I remembered it as a competent, cold place. A place that did its work without complaint and without warmth. My wolf was quiet in my chest as we rode through the gate. He had been quiet for most of this journey, not the quiet of rest, but the quiet of a creature listening for something he has not yet heard. I noticed it and said nothing, not even to myself. Elder Wynn met me in the garrison yard. He was a broad-shouldered man going gray, with the manner of someone who has held a small authority for a long time and has come to confuse it with a large one. He bowed correctly. He spoke the words of welcome without warmth. He gestured to the quarters prepared and began immediately, before I had dismounted, to explain the situation with the widow. I let him speak. I do not stop men from speaking when they are telling me things. They reveal more when they think they are persuading me than when they believe they have already succeeded. Wynn told me she had been at Kelrath 3 years, that her mate had been a garrison farrier, that she had no kin in Varnstead to receive her, that the men had grown too easy around her, that she was not pack and never would be, that her presence was confusing to order. He said that last part carefully, as though he had rehearsed it. Confusing to order, I repeated. Yes, my king. In what way? He paused. I could see him choosing. She is present, my king. The men bring her things. She tends the garrison yard. She has opinions that the men listen to. About what subjects? Another pause. About the wolves. That was when I looked past him. At the far end of the garrison yard, beyond the block, there was a stone cottage with a low door and a yard of its own bounded by a fence of gray wood. The gate of that fence was open. In the yard, in the pale morning light, 3 shapes lay stretched on the ground. Wolves. I knew them. I knew their markings from the garrison manifest I had read 2 nights before in a way station. 3 pack wolves listed under injured, status uncertain. Save the big dark male who had taken a crescent blade in the shoulder during the summer raid. Bran, a female with damage to 1 foreleg from a trap. Watt, a young male who had stopped eating after the raid and whom 2 garrison healers had failed to bring back. All 3 listed with a notation I had seen on garrison manifests before and which always meant the same thing. Likely removal pending. They were asleep. Not the shallow sleep of sick animals, the deep, heavy sleep of creatures at rest. Save's flank rose and fell slowly. Bran was curled with her head on her good foreleg. Watt, the young one who had stopped eating, had his chin on the low step of the cottage doorway. I stood in my stirrups and looked at them for a long moment. Then I dismounted, handed my reins to the garrison man who came to receive them, and walked across the yard toward the fence. Wynn followed me. He was speaking. I was not listening. At the fence gate I stopped. There was a woman in the doorway of the cottage, behind Watt's head. She was looking at me with the calm, unhurried look of someone who had seen me coming and had decided, some time before I arrived, that she was not going to be afraid. She was not young, not old either, but past the first plainness of youth, settled into the kind of face that has lived in itself long enough to be comfortable there. Her hair was dark and she wore it simply, pulled back from a face that was neither pretty nor unpretty, only very still. Her hands were loose at her sides. Healer's hands, I thought, not the trained healer's look, no kit, no formal stand, but the hands of someone accustomed to touching things that needed to be touched carefully. She did not bow. I noticed that. I did not say anything about it. "These are garrison wolves," I said. "Yes," she said. "They were listed as failing. They were when I began with them." Her voice was even, not defiant, even. There is a difference, and I knew it the moment I heard it. "Who authorized you to tend them?" No one. The garrison healers had released them from care. Save was fevered and biting. Bran would not bear weight. Watt had not eaten in 14 days. She looked at me without blinking. I did not ask authorization. The wolves needed tending, and I knew how to tend them. Behind me, Elder Wynn made a sound that I did not acknowledge. "You are Rena Aldcroft," I said. "Yes, my king." So she knew how to use the title when she chose to. She simply hadn't chosen to lead with it. I found I did not mind. I had spent enough of my life surrounded by men who opened with titles and closed with nothing. "The elders have asked me to resolve your situation," I said. She looked at me for a moment. The morning fog was still about us, soft on the moorland beyond the hold's wall, and she was very clear against it, solid and quiet like the stone of Kelrath itself. "I know," she said. "Elder Wynn has told me so twice this month, and Elder Pellin once before that. And I am still here," she said without edge, simply a fact. Something moved in my chest that was not quite what I would have named it at that moment. My wolf had gone very still, not the listening still of the journey here, but a different stillness, a held breath quality, as though he had just heard the thing he'd been waiting for and had not yet decided what to do with the knowledge. I looked at the 3 sleeping wolves. "How long?" I said. "Save 4 months, Bran 6, Watt." She looked down at the young one's head on her step. "Watt came to me in the spring. He came himself, I did not go to him." She paused. "He was very thin." I looked at Watt. He was not thin now. He was a solid, well-muscled young male sleeping with the particular abandonment of a creature that feels completely safe. I did not give the order that day. I told Elder Wynn I would review the matter in the morning, which was not what he wanted to hear, and he had the sense not to say so. I went to my quarters in the garrison block, and I read the manifest again, and I sat for a long time looking at the lamp on the table and not thinking about anything in particular, which is what I do when I am thinking about something I am not yet ready to admit. My wolf was not quiet now. He paced. He had not paced like that in years, not since before I had given up expecting to find what I had long since stopped calling by its name. I had not spoken of a mate in a long time. I had been presented with women my council considered suitable, and I had been courteous to each of them and had felt nothing, and eventually my council had learned to stop presenting them. I was 34 years old. I had a kingdom that ran with reasonable justice and a border that held and pack wolves who were loyal, and I had told myself, in the careful way men tell themselves things they know are small consolations, that this was enough. Standing at the fence gate that morning, looking at 3 wolves sleeping in a rankless widow's yard, I had felt something change in the architecture of what I knew. I did not want to have felt it. I did not have the option of not having felt it. In the morning I went back. I went early, before the garrison had fully stirred, before Elder Wynn could position himself to accompany me. The fog was heavier, the hold damp and stone-gray, and I went across the yard alone and stood again at the fence gate. She was already there. She was crouched beside Bran, and she had the wolf's foreleg in her hands, working with her fingers along the tendons in a slow, deliberate pattern that was not quite a healer's technique and not quite a farrier's, something of both, something her own. Bran was not fighting her. Bran was watching her own leg with the puzzled, trusting look of a creature who has decided that pain is safe in these hands. Save was sitting nearby watching. He turned his head when I came to the gate. He did not growl. Garrison wolves are not always easy with strangers. Save, who had been biting when he was fevered, simply looked at me and then looked back at the woman. I opened the gate and came in. She did not look up immediately. She finished the movement she was making and set Bran's leg gently on the ground before she looked at me. "My king," she said. "Tell me how you learned this," I said. She sat back on her heels. "My mate was the Garrison farrier. I came here with him 8 years ago. I learned what I could learn from him about the pack wolves because they are not so different from horses in some ways, and in some ways they are very different, and the difference interested me." A small pause. After he died, I had nothing else to do with what I had learned. "The wolves were here. Did you know Save had bitten 2 Garrison men?" "Yes, I knew because he bit me as well the first time I went to him." She looked at her right hand. I could not see a scar from where I stood, but her eyes found a place on her palm easily. "He was frightened and in pain. I came back the next day, and the day after. Until he stopped biting. Until he trusted me enough to let me help him." I crouched down at some distance from Bran and looked at the wolf's foreleg. Even from here I could see the difference from what the manifest had noted. The swelling described in the Garrison healer's notes was gone. The leg sat correctly. Bran had weight on it. "The Garrison healers could not achieve this," I said. "The Garrison healers have a great deal to do," she said, without judgment. "And the techniques that work for human pack members are not always the techniques that work for the wolves." She paused again. "I have more time than they do. I am not pressed to produce a result quickly. I can come back each day." There it was. The quality I had felt standing at the gate yesterday, distilled into something I could name. She was not in a hurry. She had nowhere to be that mattered more than here. And because she had nowhere more important to be, she could give these animals what no one else had. The repeated, patient presence of someone who was not trying to force a conclusion. I had spent my life in a position where everyone around me was trying to force a conclusion. Every person who came to me wanted something decided, something acted on, something resolved before the next petition came through. I had grown so accustomed to it that I had begun to mistake urgency for importance and presence for pressure. She was present without pressure. My wolf had stopped pacing. He had come to a stillness that was different again from either of the stillnesses I had felt before, the listening still of the journey, the held breath still of the gate yesterday. This was the stillness of an answer. The particular quiet of a question that has been running so long you have forgotten it is a question. And then without warning the answer is simply there, obvious as daylight, impossible to unsee. I was aware of the cold damp of the morning. The weight of the crown I was not wearing here, though I carried it in every word I spoke and every authority I represented. The order in my saddlebag. I stood up. "The elders believe your presence here is a source of disorder," I said. She looked at me. Her face did not change. "I know what they believe." "What do you say to it?" A small silence. Not the silence of someone calculating what is safe to say, but the silence of someone who does not speak before she has finished thinking. I had been king for 9 years, and in 9 years I had learned to love that silence in the people I dealt with and to fear its absence. "I say that 3 wolves who were listed as failing are alive and sound," she said. "I say that the Garrison men are not disordered. They are kind to me because I am the only woman in the hold who is not here in an official capacity, and kindness is not disorder. I say that I have lived here 3 years since my mate died, and I have done harm to nothing and no one." She held my gaze. "I cannot speak to what Elder Wynn finds confusing. I can only tell you what is true." "What is true?" I cannot speak to what Elder Wynn finds confusing. I can only tell you what is true. I stood in her yard in the morning fog with 3 garrison wolves around me, and I looked at her. And for a moment the weight of every careful, official, managed thing I did in my life as a king sat on one side of something, and this woman with healer's hands and her quiet face sat on the other. I will not be giving the removal order today, I said. She nodded. She did not look surprised or grateful or relieved. She looked at me with the same evenness she had looked at me with yesterday, the same evenness she probably looked at wounded wolves with, not indifferent but unflappable, as though whatever happened was a thing to be dealt with steadily, not a thing to be feared. I left the yard before I could say anything I had not yet thought through. The inspection of Kelrath Hold took 3 days. I had not planned for 3 days. I had planned for 1, possibly 2. There was a garrison review to conduct, a supply manifest to verify, 2 border disputes to hear, a meeting with the Crescent Crossing warden that had been delayed twice already. All of this I did. All of it was competent, correct, and exactly what a border hold inspection should be. And every morning and every evening I found some reason to cross the garrison yard to the fence with the gray wooden posts, and every time I did she was there, or Watt was at the step, and she came to the doorway, or I could hear from inside the low sound of her moving about and the particular quiet of the wolves in her company. On the second morning I went early enough that she was heating something on a small iron stove inside the cottage, and the door was open, and I could smell it broth, by the heaviness of it, rich and dark, and something else underneath that I could not name. She did not look surprised to see me at the gate again. She came out with 2 cups and handed one to me through the fence with such matter-of-factness that I took it before it occurred to me to wonder whether I had decided to come in. I had not come in. I took the cup and stood at the fence and drank, and she sat on the low step with Watt at her side, and we did not speak for a while. He is eating properly now, I said, meaning Watt. Since the 3rd week, she said. He needed time and company more than he needed medication. Some grief is like that. I thought of the manifest notation again. Stopped eating after the raid. 3 words for something that was, I understood now, more than a medical notation. He had been in the raid. He had seen something he could not recover from alone. You understood what was wrong with him, I said. I understood that something had happened to him, she said. You do not need to understand the exact shape of a grief to help. You only need to be present without demanding it end. I looked at her over the fence. The fog was lighter today, the moorland beginning to show in patches of brown and gray beyond the wall, and the light on her face was pale and flat and honest. She was looking at Watt, not at me, one hand resting on his back. Elder Wynn tells me your mate died in this hold, I said. A pause, yes. You stayed. I had nowhere else. She said it simply, without self-pity. And then I had the wolves, and then 3 years became what they are. She glanced at me. It is easier to leave a place before it has become part of you. Is Kelrath part of you? She thought about that with the seriousness she gave to everything I asked her. Parts of it, she said. The ridge in the morning, the crossing in autumn when the light comes low, the way the garrison wolves howl when the weather turns. She looked back at the moorland. The sound of a place becomes part of you before you realize it is happening. I did not say anything. I thought of Varnstead, my own hold to the east, the high rooms of it, the cold corridors, the sounds of a large place at night, and I tried to remember when I had last found a sound within it that felt like mine. Not a sound of authority or ceremony. A sound that was simply the sound of a place I loved. I could not remember. The cup was warm in my hands. The wolves were drowsy in the morning light. She was very still. My wolf was not pacing and was not in the held breath quiet. He was simply present in a way he had not been in a very long time, comfortable, like Watt on the step, like a creature who has come to a place where he does not need to be on guard. On the second evening I went back because Save had gotten up from his sleeping place and come to stand at the fence, which he had not done before. She was not in the yard. Save stood at the fence and looked at me with the patient, gold-eyed attention of a large animal who has decided to take an interest in something. I stood on the other side and looked back at him. After a moment the cottage door opened and she came out, carrying a bucket. She saw Save at the fence, she saw me, she set the bucket down. "He has not come to the fence for anyone," she said, "since the injury." "I know. He came to the fence when Edric was alive," she said. "My mate, he was the farrier, the wolves knew him." She came across the yard and stood beside the large wolf at the fence, and Save turned his head and bumped it against her shoulder in the way pack wolves do when they are acknowledging pack, and something locked in my chest with a sensation I did not immediately know how to describe. Not pain, not quite. The ache that is adjacent to it, the one that lives in the understanding of what something is. She was packed to these wolves. She had no standing in the pack structure, no rank, no mate, no official claim to anything in Kelrath's hierarchy. The elders were not wrong that she was not pack in any formal sense. They simply did not understand that the pack wolves had their own understanding of the matter, and that their understanding was older and more accurate than any hierarchy the elders had devised. "They know you," I said. "They know I am safe," she said. "It is not the same thing, but for a wounded animal it matters more." I put my hand on the fence post. Save looked at it. He came forward and put his nose against the back of my hand with the careful, deliberate motion of a wolf investigating something he has decided is probably trustworthy. His nose was cold and dry, which was good. Garrison healers noted the state of the nose. A cold, dry nose on a wolf who had been fevered meant the fever had fully broken. "He is well," I said. "Yes." "You healed him." "He healed himself," she said. "I only made it possible." I looked at her then, and she was looking at Save and not at me, and I was close enough to the fence that the distance between us was very small, the width of the gray wooden posts, the arm's length that is, and is not a distance at all. And the bond, the thing I had been trained from boyhood to recognize when it came, the thing I had waited for and stopped waiting for and told myself I had come to peace with the absence of, the bond declared itself. Not as fire. Not as the lightning strike the old songs favor, the sudden blaze that leaves no question. It declared itself the way a tide does, as something that had, in fact, been present all along, had been the quality of the air for 2 days without my naming it, and was now simply undeniable. The whole of it, not a part. The recognition that runs all the way to the root of the wolf nature in my chest and settles there with the authority of something that has always been true. "She is mine," my wolf said, "not mine in the sense of possession, mine in the sense of completion, the sentence with its subject finally in place." I stood at the fence with the cold air of Kelrath around me, and Save's nose against my hand, and the knowledge so large in my chest I could not have spoken around it if I had tried. She looked up at me. I do not know what she saw in my face. She was still that specific stillness she held at all times, but with something altered underneath it now, some attention that had not been quite so sharp before. "My king," she said carefully. "Keaton," I said. I did not know I was going to say it until I had. "My name is Keaton." She looked at me for a long moment. "I know," she said. "Then use it." A silence. Something moved in her face, not surprise, not the careful withdrawal of someone who has been offered a thing too large and cannot accept it. Something quieter. The look of someone who is deciding, seriously and with full attention, whether to believe what she is seeing. "Keaton," she said. My wolf went very still at the sound of it, the good kind. The kind that is not waiting for anything, because it has arrived. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the garrison block quarters with the lamp burning, and I thought through what I was doing with the careful, systematic attention I brought to every decision of consequence, which was the method I had developed over 9 years of kingship for ensuring I did not mistake feeling for wisdom. I listed what I knew. I examined what I did not know. I held every possible objection up to the light. She was rankless, that was true. She had no pack standing and could not easily be given any. Pack standing in Varnstead descended through blood or through a mate bond formally acknowledged, and the acknowledgment of a mate bond between the king and a rankless widow would be the matter of talk for a generation. She had no family in Varnstead, no connections to manage, no alliances to navigate, which could be read as a simplicity or as an isolation. She had been here 3 years at the border of the kingdom, in a cottage beside the garrison, tending wounded wolves that no one else had troubled to tend, asking nothing of anyone. I turned these facts over and examined them as I would examine a border agreement or a garrison assessment, looking for the flaw in my reasoning, the place where I was letting what I wanted distort what I saw. I found no flaw. This was not a young man's infatuation. I was 34 years old, and I had been infatuated in my youth, and I knew the character of it, the urgency, the insistence that everything is more than it is, the way it makes a man deaf to the good counsel of his own judgment. This was nothing like that. This was more like standing on solid ground after a long time on uncertain terrain and recognizing the solidity for what it was. This was a king's recognition, the identification of something that is true, which had always been true, which had simply waited for its moment. The bond once declared does not undeclare. I had known this from boyhood. My father had explained it when I was old enough to ask. Once the mate bond rises fully and names itself, denying it is not a matter of discipline or decision. It is damage. To yourself, to the one the bond names. I had never had cause to test this knowledge. I had cause now. The order was still in my saddlebag. At some hour before dawn, I made my decision, which was the only decision I had been going to make since I stood at a fence gate 2 mornings ago and looked at 3 sleeping garrison wolves and a woman in a low doorway. On the 3rd morning, I asked Elder Wynne to assemble the garrison in the yard. He asked whether this was for the formal inspection review. I told him it was. He looked uncertain, which was correct, because I had already conducted the inspection review at mid-morning the day before and he knew it. But I had asked in the way that ends questions, and so no question was asked. The garrison assembled. 43 men and women in border livery, garrison wolves at the edges. The 4 elders of Kelrath hold in their places at the front of the group, with the bearing of people who know they are about to receive something, and are not yet sure what. Elder Wynne stood with Elder Pellin and the other 2, Dorth and Cass, and they all had the particular expression of men who believe they are about to be given what they asked for. I had the order from my saddlebag in my hand. I had held it through the morning. I had not opened it again. I held it in front of the assembled garrison and I spoke. The elders of Kelrath Hold have brought a matter before me for resolution, I said. My voice carried in the yard without effort. The stone of the hold caught it and held it. That matter concerns the woman Rena Aldcroft, who has lived and worked within this hold for 3 years. I paused. All 43 garrison members were attending. The 4 elders were very still. Kelrath Hold has, in its current garrison manifest, 3 pack wolves listed as injured and of uncertain status, I said, save a male Bran, a female Wat, a male. 3 wolves who have been under the care of the garrison healers without satisfactory resolution. I looked at the garrison. I have spent 2 days reviewing their current condition. All 3 are healed or healing beyond what the medical notes projected. All 3 are well-fed, weight-bearing, and socially engaged. A murmur in the ranks. The garrison men and women knew this. Some of them had watched it happen over months and had not been able to explain it officially. This is the work of Rena Aldcroft, I said, who is not a garrison healer, who holds no official capacity in this hold, who received no authorization for her work because the work needed doing and there was no formal channel for the need. I let that sit for a moment. The garrison lost no wolves this year. In a season when we lost men in the Crescent Raid, we lost no wolves. That is not a small thing. Elder Wynn had gone still in the particular way of a man who can see where something is going and has not yet decided whether to fight it. I looked at him directly. The order I was asked to carry brings a resolution to the matter of Rena Aldcroft's presence in Kelrath Hold, I said. I held the order up. I looked at the parchment for a moment, and then I looked at Wynn. I am returning this order unsigned. The matter is resolved as follows. I folded the order and put it in the breast of my riding coat, not in the saddlebag, in my own keeping. Rena Aldcroft is placed under the protection of the King of Varnstead, I said. She holds the status of a recognized benefactor of the garrison pack, which entitles her to residence within the hold, access to garrison provisions, and the protections of pack standing without formal blood claim, a designation I am extending by the authority of the Crown. Any future grievance against her person or residence must be brought before me directly. I looked at the elders, all 4 of them. Not to the garrison administration, to me. Elder Wynn was very red. Elder Pellin had the look of a man who is calculating whether there is a response worth making. There was not, and after a moment his face told me he knew it. I turned to the garrison. This inspection finds Kelrath Hold in good order, I said. Your work on the border does your kingdom credit. Dismissed. The garrison dispersed with the controlled energy of people who have a great many things to say to each other and are correctly waiting until they are out of the yard to say them. The 4 elders lingered, and I let them linger for exactly as long as it took me to understand they were waiting for a private conversation, and then I turned and walked toward the garrison block without offering one. There are privileges of rank that I do not frequently use. The privilege of walking away without explaining myself is one I reserve for moments when the explanation would only give a disagreement the dignity it does not deserve. She was at the fence when I crossed the yard. Not waiting, she would not have staged herself at the fence to wait for news. She was there because Watt had been restless that morning, and she had brought him out into the yard. But she had been close enough to the garrison assembly that she had heard, and she was at the fence when I came to it, and she was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on her face in the 2 days I had been watching her face carefully. It was not the evenness, it was not the stillness. It was something underneath both of those, something that lived there usually, and that the evenness covered, not hidden exactly, but protected. Something that was, I realized when I saw it, the quality of a person who has been in a vulnerable position long enough to learn to keep the most important things out of sight. It was now in sight. You did not have to do that, she said. I had to do exactly that, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Watt had come to the fence and was pressing against her leg, and she put her hand on his back without looking down, the automatic gesture of someone who is accustomed to a creature's weight. Elder Wynn will not forgive it, she said. Elder Wynn's forgiveness is not a thing I am in the practice of requiring, I said. Something moved at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile, the possibility of one, a thing I thought might be the first time I had come close to drawing it from her, and I found I wanted very much to complete the distance. The designation you described, she said carefully, a recognized benefactor of the garrison pack, does that exist? It does now. She looked at me steadily. Is that the whole of what you mean? She was precise, this woman. She asked what she wanted to know. I had been a king long enough to understand the value of precision and the cost of its absence, and I recognized it in her as I would recognize good iron, by the quality of the ring it gave when struck. I came to the fence. I stood close enough that the fence was between us and not between us, that gray-posted boundary that had been the measure of everything for 2 mornings, and I looked at her with what I was. Not a king at this moment. A man who has been running a long time towards something he had stopped believing he would find. The bond has declared itself, I said. She was very still. I do not tell you this to demand anything of you, I said. I tell you because you asked what I mean, and that is what I mean. The bond rose the night before last, and it has not changed. I paused. I will not press you. I will not make this a command or a claim. I am telling you what is true, which is what you gave me 2 days ago and what I owe you in return. The morning was very quiet around us. The fog had cleared completely for the first time since I'd arrived, and the moorland beyond the hold was all its colors at once, the brown and the gray and the deep green of the wet places, and the sky above it pale and wide. The sound of the hold behind me, a garrison running its ordinary morning tasks. The sound of the yard, Watts breathing, the shift of save inside the cottage, the small sounds of a stone fence in the cold. Rena Aldcroft looked at me for a long time. I know something has been different, she said at last. Since the morning you came to the gate, I did not name it. You knew. I wondered, she said carefully. I did not let myself know. She looked at Watts back under her hand. It seemed too large a thing to be certain of. Yes, I said. I know. You have been a king for 9 years, she said. It was not quite a question. She was laying things out, the way I lay out garrison manifests, getting the facts in order before making an assessment. Yes. And you have not, she stopped, started again. The bond has not risen before. No. She absorbed that in the way she absorbed everything, without rushing to a conclusion. Watt turned his head and pressed his nose against her wrist. She looked at him, and then she looked back at me. What would it mean, she said, for someone with no pack standing? It would mean I extend pack standing, I said, not as a designation I create for a garrison manifest, as a king who acknowledges his mate before the pack. I held her gaze. It would mean a great deal of inconvenience and a great deal of noise, and a great deal of people saying things that are not true, and several important conversations with my counsel that I have been, for the past 2 days, mentally preparing to have. Something shifted in her expression. The almost smile was there again, more present this time. You have been preparing to have them for 2 days. I had to be certain, I said. I am certain. She looked at the fence between us. She put her hand on the top of the post. Her hand, the healer's hand, the farrier's widow's hand, the hand that had come back day after day to an animal that bit her until the trust was built. I am not a convenient choice, she said, for a king. No, I said. You are not. I have no family, no connections, no rank. No. I have 3 garrison wolves in a stone cottage. 4, as of this morning, I said. Save has decided to add himself to your accounting. He came to the gate for me last night, and I believe he is now prepared to take me seriously. The smile arrived. Not almost the whole of it, quiet and warm. The smile of a woman who does not spend smiles carelessly, and so each one is worth more than it would be on another face. It was the first time, and I stood at the fence and felt my wolf settle into the particular peace that I had heard described, and had not understood until now, the peace of an animal who has, after a long and uncertain journey, come home. Keaton, she said. Yes. If I were to open the gate, she said, what would you do? The question, the specific, precise question, not a question that assumed an answer, not a question that pressured a response, a question that was simply a question, asked with the same seriousness she gave to everything, given the weight it deserved. I put my hand on the gate latch. Come in, I said. She looked at me for one more moment, that long, serious, unhurried look, the look of a woman who does not move before she has finished thinking. Then she stepped back from the gate and made room. I opened it and walked in. Watt moved aside, and then came back immediately and pressed against my leg with the confidence of a wolf who has already decided something about you and has been waiting for you to catch up. I put my hand on his head. I looked at the woman who had stood in her doorway 2 mornings ago and looked at me without fear, who had handed me a cup of broth through a fence with matter-of-factness, who had told me what is true was all she could offer. She was looking at me now without the evenness, without the protection of stillness. She looked like herself, the face under the face she showed when she was not certain of the ground. She looked like someone who is making a large decision and is not afraid of it but is taking it with appropriate seriousness. "I do not know," she said slowly, "how to be a king's mate." "I do not know how to have one," I said. "I expect we will figure it out." Another quiet moment. Save had come out of the cottage doorway and was standing a few feet back, watching us with the patient gold attention he had given me at the fence last night. Bran was somewhere inside. The hold around us was going about its mourning. The moorland beyond the walls was wide and still, and from here, very beautiful. "I should tell you," she said, "that I healed your wolves because they needed healing, not for any other reason." "I know," I said, "that is why I am here." She looked at that, turned it over the way she turned everything over, and then she put out her hand, not in the formal way, not the gesture of a ceremony or an agreement, just her hand open, the way you offer a hand to an animal you want to trust you. I took it. The bond was warm all through me, the tide of it complete, and my wolf was as quiet as I had ever known him. The quiet of something that has been searching and has found, the quiet that does not need to move because it has arrived. We stood in her yard in the morning light of Kelrath Hold, the moorland fog all gone, the hold running its ordinary sounds around us, the wolves at our feet, and neither of us said anything for a while. There was nothing that needed saying. What is true does not require announcing. It only requires being there, patient as stone, until the right person comes to the gate. She had taught me that in 2 days without ever intending to. I held her hand and listened to the sound of a place I had not expected to love, and found, to my own quiet surprise, that it was already beginning to become mine.